Matt Risen, welcome to New Mexico in Focus.
Thanks for having me.
So we will get to Manny Gonzalez, Rudy Mora, and the local connections in a moment, but I would like to begin with part of what was in the headline on your October 26th Albuquerque Journal story, which mentioned a cross-country machine gun scheme. Based on the indictment that was filed in U.S. District Court in Maryland and your reporting, what was the scheme and how did it work?
So there's a man named Sean Sullivan. He lives out east. He's a gun dealer. He's also, at the time of this, was a Department of Homeland Security analyst, and he works for BNT USA, which is like a silencer gun manufacturer, importer type. But he has the ability to import guns, restricted guns that aren't allowed to be manufactured in this country, so you have to import them. And basically what happened was Sullivan had a friend named Larry Vickers who was Delta Force, big gun enthusiast, has a YouTube channel, millions of views. He reviews guns, loves the AK-47 apparently, has one signed by Kalashnikov or
boy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I didn't see that part.
No, yeah. That was my other research. But basically, Sullivan had Vickers knew police chiefs in various areas, and Vickers would ask for a favor from these police chiefs for them to sign documents. These documents are called law letters. And what a law letter is it allows for the importation of a machine gun if it's for the use of demonstrating to a law enforcement agency for possible purchase. So basically, like a chief of police can say, well, hey, I'm interested in buying this machine gun or this restricted weapon. They can sign a law letter stating that on like a department letterhead. And then basically they would give these letters to Vickers as a favor though. They didn't actually, these were small departments. They didn't have SWAT teams. One of them actually only had one sworn officer, and that was the police chief. So they would give these letters to Vickers, and then Vickers would give these letters to Sullivan, who would turn them into the ATF on an application to import guns and basically pay for machine guns. And the ATF would approve these requests based upon these law letters. And then Sullivan would be able to import these weapons, and then him and Vickers would split them up amongst themselves. They would sell some of them. They would post them online. They were
keep the ones they like,
and
right?
keep the ones they like. Yeah, no, they would like show pictures and be like, oh, I want that one, or like give me the one with the sling. Mm-hmm. And then they would sell some of them for like $100,000. They're like, and then give them to collectors. And there are other people who are named and not charged who were involved in kind of like being given the guns, buying the guns. But that was like
some of that.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to get to quickly off the top here, the feds call those machine guns. What are some of the guns we're talking about here?
So some of the guns we're talking about are Glock 18s, which are they're Glock pistols, but they fire automatically. Some of the guns were it's FAMAS. I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's like might be FAMAS. Those were like automatic weapons. Silencers are considered NFAs, like NFA weapons. And then like we're talking like war relics. Like we're talking guns that need a trailer to be moved from place to place and need water to cool them because they fire 950 bullets in a minute.
So what is required to be able to put your hands on this kind of firepower? I'm going to get calls from people who say it's okay to own these sorts of weapons, but if you want an MP5 or an Uzi pistol, you talked about it some in your first answer, but what do I have to do to have one of those guns?
You would have to be a federal firearm licensee, so basically a gun dealer, but you would also have to have licensure to you have to get a license to be able to possess, transfer, or buy NFA firearms. NFA firearms are firearms restricted in the National Firearms Act. And that was an act that was put in place a long time ago and basically just banned automatic weapons, short barrel rifles, silencers, parts that make guns automatic.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. So that's going to get us a little bit to Manny and Rudy. I want to go back to kind of the design of the scheme. I love the way you put it in your story that you should think of it like a doctor writing fraudulent prescriptions for his friends. Who was who in that analogy in the scenario we're talking about now?
So in that analogy, the doctor is a police chief. The friends are gun dealers, gun enthusiasts, gun collectors, and the prescriptions, the drugs, are like automatic weapons. So yeah, it's pretty wild stuff.
So who were Manny and Rudy in this particular scenario? And let's get to some specifics while we're at it. In this indictment, let's make it clear so far that they have not been charged. Neither of them is facing any charges at this time. But how many of these law letters did those guys write, and how many guns are we talking about?
Between them, they wrote over 100 law letters, and they requested hundreds of guns.
Almost 600, just
Yes.
from Manny, right?
Yes, just from Manny. Yeah, hundreds of guns between the two of them, and basically they requested various firearms, restricted ones. The only ones we know about was the FAMAS rifles, automatic rifles, and then the Glocks, the automatic Glocks. They requested several of those. And those actually got imported on those requests. It's unclear if they ever made it here or into anyone's possession here, but they made it into the country.
So we don't know what became of the guns they requested, right?
We don't.
That is an outstanding question that I'm sure you're pursuing, as a number of other reporters probably are. I want to go back to the law letter situation, though. So in this instance, they'd have to sign this letter that says, I would like to perform this demonstration. I'm thinking about buying some of these guns. The best we know so far, did Manny or Rudy or either of the other two law enforcement officials ever plan on conducting these demonstrations or having these guns in their arsenals?
To our knowledge, no. I mean, in the indictment, it says that both Gonzalez and Mora had no expectation that these guns would ever be demonstrated or purchased. And there's actually emails in a separate petition where basically an ATF is denying one of the requests that Manny did, basically in saying that in the denial that Gonzalez himself said there was no use for these guns and there wouldn't be a use for these guns.
Did he go back to ATF and make a subsequent statement? I think I remember that from the reporting. Did he offer some contradictory answers?
Yeah, so this all happened in like a several month time period. But basically they reached out to him and said, hey, we're reaching out to you because we flagged that these guns are being requested. These don't seem like, they were World War II relics. One of them was the gun that has to be on a trailer. And like, these don't seem like guns you would need. Did you approve these law letters? Because if not, this, basically explaining the loophole and stuff. And so, and then they sent another email that was like, hey, a gun dealer in Florida is now using a law letter signed by you, like for Gonzalez, obviously. And so they set up a meeting, and then apparently at that time, Manny told them, I don't need these guns. The gun requests were denied. But then a meeting was set up with Mora, Manny, Larry Corrin, the BCSO SWAT, and then ATF, and to James Tafoya, a gun owner in town.
We'll get to him
in a second. A meeting was set up, and apparently at that meeting that Manny told the ATF that they were valid and authentic letters. And this is after he said that he would have no use for those weapons.
Okay, one other thing I just want to get clear during all of this. Manny Gonzalez was the sheriff of Bernalillo County during the period of time that this went on. It went on for 5 or 6 years, if I remember correctly.
5 or 6 years.
And Rudy Mora was his undersheriff when Manny was at BCSO, but the allegations, sort of naming him, the period of time that he was signing these letters, what was his job then?
He was the police chief for Laguna Pueblo.
Okay. So the local connection for Manny and Rudy, the person they were writing these letters for, is a guy named James Christopher Tafoya. Why might my viewers remember his name from before?
James Tafoya, it was when there was a big protest downtown. A lot of APD's officers were downtown, and during that time, someone went to his gun store on the west side, and they cut the power and broke in, and they stole more than 100 guns. None of them were the NFA guns. I actually verified that. But they stole more than 100 guns from the store, and they never found they never charged anyone for that crime, and most of those guns are still out there somewhere.
Has Tafoya been in the news otherwise before this? I seem to remember one other story that might have involved him.
Yeah, I wrote a package about straw purchasing, and I kind of wanted to find out where a lot of it was happening. And basically what I found was that Tafoya's was one of 2 gun stores where most of the charged straw purchasing offenses originated in the state. Meaning that that's where people went and said, this gun's for me, when really it wasn't for them.
Woof. So the ATF knew who this guy was before any of this. At least they should have known.
Yes. Yeah, they'd been approving NFA weapons for him for a long time before this stuff happened.
So I want to go back to the two other law enforcement folks who were mixed up in this whole thing. One is a police chief from North Carolina, the other from a tiny department in North Dakota. What are they alleged to have done, and how is it, if it's different, from what Manny and Rudy are alleged to have done?
So what they have done is they had signed law letters for Vickers and for other co-conspirators who are not charged, but not even named, actually just initials are in the indictments, but they had signed law letters requesting machine guns. What the ATF had in the indictment is actual text message communications between them where it's like clear that this is like Vickers asking for a favor, or this other initialed person asking for a favor, and they are clearly saying, okay, I'll do it for you this one time, or you owe me one, which clearly points like this was not about them getting machine guns. The difference between what they did, as far as I can tell, what they did and what Gonzalez and Mora did, I don't see a difference personally. The only difference between them, I think, is that Gonzalez and Mora, when they were BCSO, they actually had a department that had a SWAT unit. They had like a lot more officers. Those two police chiefs were like, one of them was the only sworn officer for the department, and the other one just had like a couple dozen or maybe a couple dozen officers.
And Manny and Rudy signed a lot more letters for a lot more guns too, and yet they're not charged. One question I have, and I'll ask if you know, are you aware of any ongoing investigation related to this?
I reached out to the U.S. Attorney's Office out there in like Maryland, where this is like being charged out of, and they would not confirm or deny that an investigation was even occurring, which is
the classic federal response, Matt.
It's silly, yeah.
Okay, so at this juncture, Manny's not talking, Rudy's not talking. They're not talking to you, they're not talking to me. Best I can tell, they might be talking to a handful of lawyers around town. Who is talking is John Allen, the current sheriff. He had a news conference not long after the news broke. What did you learn then?
He basically came out and said, look, here's the NFA weapons that we have. And it was really interesting. They have some World War II relic guns. They don't have ones that need trailers, but they have ones that like shoot 900 plus rounds a minute. They have Bushmasters, which is like, like kind of like carbine rifles. They had a sawed-off double-barrel shotgun.
Sheesh.
Yeah, and basically another thing that was interesting that came out of that though was they found out in their audit that there were a couple dozen AK-47s at Laguna Pueblo that belonged to a private citizen, and there had been some kind of communications where deputies had to go to Laguna Pueblo and get the guns and bring them to BCSO's armory. And I'm still looking into that whole thing, but that was basically something that come out of that too, where like he was unaware that those guns were in there. He said he was unaware those guns were in their armory, and so basically they had to then find that private citizen, and I believe they relinquished the guns to him after tagging them into some kind of evidence system.
Matt, I'm not going to ask you to tip your hand, but I've known you long enough to know that you've still got questions here. Briefly, we got about a minute left. What are some of the questions you still have?
I'm kind of curious what happened in that meeting between ATF and Manny, and I'm curious what happened after that, because according to another petition, Tafoya wanted his guns back because they didn't charge him for years after they charged Sullivan and Vickers. And in the petitions, he basically says that after that meeting with the ATF, where Manny said they're valid and authentic, that the ATF began approving more letters between the parties. And so I'm kind of interested like what played out after that. I'm interested in like this private citizen with these AK-47s, because like, I mean, that the fact that they were at Laguna Pueblo and then they were brought to BCSO apparently under the orders of the leadership is very coincidental when you think about Mora and Manny both being involved in this. So, I mean, those are just some of the questions I have at this point.
Well, I will be looking forward to reading the answers you find, and I know that pretty much everybody else I know will be as well. Thanks a ton for joining me today and breaking it down.
Thanks for having me.
I'll be back here at the table in a quick second with Diane Layden, who sits on the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office Advisory Review Board, to talk about why oversight and accountability have been challenging in New Mexico and beyond for decades when it comes to sheriffs.